So I want to take you on a journey. And to get started with that, or just to put the journey in context, we'll have to go kind of back in time. Maybe a few years back in time, maybe a million years back in time. Let's go 400 million years back in time. So roughly between 300 to 400 million years back, there was a geological occurrence that happened, like a tectonic episode, in one of the continents in the world. And the pressure from that geological occurrence on the edges of the continent put so much pressure that the center of that continent converted into ripples of mountains. And it ended up creating beautiful ranges, a desert-like landscape, and it exposed the entire quartzite, which is one of the hardest rocks. Welcome to the Red Centre in Australia, the Australian outback. It actually looks like Mars in some ways because of its desolate, deserted structure. I found myself walking over here for 8 days, about 4 or 5 years back. I decided to walk carrying my backpack, 25 kilos with the food, water, all my belongings. And I decided to walk this all alone. And that's the story and that's the journey that I want to take you on. In terms of preparation, obviously a lot of training and effort had to be put in. But before I could do anything, I had to first convince my wife that it's okay for me to go on a trek like this and that to go all alone. And it was really good that she did not do extensive research to see that almost once in 2 years, there are accidents that happen and people have died doing this on their own. Luckily, she had not seen that, so she gave a sign off and said, okay, fine, you're allowed to do this, do come back safe. And so I trained for a good 4-5 months for this entire trek. And what was the trek like, just as an experience? So just to give you a perspective in terms of so this is the big center over here that you can see. And if you zoom in, and the reason the center is really called Red Center is because it actually looks like Mars because of the red soil and the rocks. And so that's the trail. It starts from Alice Springs on one side. The actual trail is about 225 kilometers. I decided to do 6 sections. Each section is about anywhere between 15 to 25 to 28 kilometers. And 6 sections is roughly 120 odd kilometers. So you walk from one end and you end on the other side. In terms of communication, there is obviously nothing over there. The only thing there's no network, needless to say. I had to go back to using a paper map. I mean, none of you would relate to that because I don't think one of you would have used a paper map. Everyone uses Google Maps. But you have to use a paper map because there's no... and the only thing that you have is this button, which you definitely don't want to press because this is an emergency. It triggers your Mission Impossible style helicopter rescue mission to kind of save you. It's the last resort. So if you break your bone or something really bad happens, that's when you're supposed to use this. And this is the only method of communication for that period of time because there's absolutely no other form of communication. Probably smoke signals, yes, maybe. In terms of food and water, you have to carry everything. Thankfully, because of the the park authorities, because this is a desert, mind you, right? So in a desert, there is no natural water that occurs. There is some places where there is some water from the rainfall which is there, but can't be relied upon. So you have to carry water. And you cannot carry water for 10 days or 8 days because water, if you consume 3 liters a day, that's 3 kilos. And everything that you want to carry is going on your back. So you have to really think hard before making a decision of what you're going to carry because everything is on your back, in your backpack. So you carry dehydrated food. It's a great invention because you pour hot water into this dehydrated packet and suddenly you have laksa and suddenly you have some pasta. So dehydrated food and water and everything that you carry, and you optimize for weight because it's a long trip. In terms of the weather, it's kind of like any desert weather, which is hot in the day and cold at night. So in the day, it can be as high as 30, it can be as high as 40. When I went, it was around 30, 32. And at night, it drops to around 5 degrees. So it's cold in the night and hot in the day. And you have to walk during the day because you have to cover as much distance as possible in the sun. And that poses a very interesting challenge. When you start walking in the morning, you're trying to race against the sun because you need to get to the next campsite before it gets dark. Because if it gets dark, then you can't walk because it's dangerous in terms of getting lost. So you have to just camp wherever you are and you just stop. So you're literally racing against the sun. You can watch the sun going down, and it's the end of the day, so you're really tired and there's fatigue setting in, but you have to race. So it's a very interesting experience to race against the sun. The terrain is in some parts like this, dry, rough, mountainous, very, very rugged, with extremely steep ascent and descent. And in terms of the locations, and this is something which I wanted to show because it's a very interesting way to capture the risks or the dangers in this kind of a trek. So I remember before taking off, I had arranged for a guide to help me get at least all my equipment and maps and everything in order. And I asked him, I said, what about wildlife? What should I watch out for? And he says, no, don't worry. We just have some, poisonous snakes and scorpions and dingoes. But, you're fine. And I said, what do you mean I'm fine? He says, you're not food for any one of them. And I said, yeah, I may not be food, but what if, the snake is just in a bad mood? Or what if just, the dingo wants to go for a nibble, just a bite, saying, hey, here's a stranger, let me go for this. And it kind of showed a very interesting perspective that from their point of view, because they are living there, they are familiar with that area, a snake and a scorpion are considered extremely harmless because they mind their business, you mind your own business, and you kind of coexist. And I was paranoid about it. I even considered saying, let me carry some anti-snake venom or something. And they said, if you get bitten, you might as well call it the end because no rescue can reach you in time. So there's no point doing anything about it. The real danger and the real risk in this kind of a situation is not linked to the external, but actually linked to hydration. So the awareness to hydrate yourself, because dehydration is what causes disorientation. So if you don't hydrate yourself, you lose your bearings. You lose your bearings, you get lost, because the path is not very clear. What you see over here, this is how the direction is indicated, a small tiny arrow, and you have a general direction that you should progress in this side. It's not a well laid out path, it's just wilderness. And so if you get lost, then you run out of water. You run out of water, then you get further dehydrated. And dehydration is the biggest risk, which is something that I got introduced to over there and said, oh, and that's probably the reason why you have accidents like death and people getting lost and injured. In terms of the triangle, again, it was a very interesting experience for me. While walking, I had to take care of three things. First is where you put your immediate next foot, because the worst thing that can happen is an ankle injury. And the ankle injury means the remaining 50,000, 20,000 steps will be painful steps. So you're watching each step as you go. You also want to keep some visibility on the periphery because you want to be aware of any snakes, scorpions sitting on your path, and you want to be mindful of them. And you also want to keep a slightly longer term distance in terms of understanding where broadly am I going, and am I going in the direction that I want to go. Kind of like some of the decisions that you are making with your courses selection, with your subjects, with your medium-term plan, with your long-term plan. And it's difficult to keep an eye on everything, so you kind of look at each of those in a very scattered, quick manner that, okay, I've got this sorted, I've got a little bit of this sorted, and I've got a little bit of that sorted. So the question now comes, why did I do this? This is me actually sitting there asking this question to myself. Why did I do this? Why am I sitting here in the middle of nowhere? By the way, in those 8 days, for 7 days, I didn't even see a single human being. Only on the 7th day, there was one small group of 3 or 4 people who were walking past, and I kind of said hello, but I actually wanted to hug them because I had not seen anybody in 7 days. And they must have wondered, like, why am I being so friendly? And they were just passing by. I wanted to stop and talk. And this is me actually sitting there. Incidentally, when I did this trek, I took these photographs. No one has seen these photographs till now, by the way. This is the first time I'm sharing them with anybody. My family, frankly, was more excited that I got back home, so they were not really fussed about this. My wife genuinely thinks that who would want to go to this kind of a landscape? I must be out of my mind. And it just, when I had the opportunity for this talk came out, I thought, hey, maybe there was a purpose behind these photographs that I took. All of them are taken by me, and I can share them with you. So I was thinking over here, why am I doing this? And this brings to the point that while we have this idea of transcending imaginary lines, there are also some actions and some things we do, some experiences we create, which are not necessarily done with any specific agenda. Sometimes it's possible. In fact, in this particular case, I didn't even choose something which was giving me bragging rights or I could flex, because people don't even know where is Lara Pinta Trail, where is this red Australian outback, who knows. If you want a bragging right, you go to the Everest, you go to Everest Base Camp, Kilimanjaro, you do all those kind of things. So when I went through this experience, this was something which I did just because I thought this is a new experience, hey, let's try it. And it's okay to do that. There are also experiences that we create which we do out of a conscious effort. I remember when I was about 7 years back, when I was working in a private bank, and I thought, there is no innovation, there is nothing happening over here, I need to go to the university. And I ended up sitting in front of 50 students at Singapore Management University in the School of Economics. And I had the same feeling because I was petrified. You have 50, 17, 18-year-olds sitting in front of you. They all have their laptops open, which means every statement you make, they can cross-check what you're saying. It's not like talking to clients. You can say anything to a client and get away with it. Half the times they don't know. I mean, these are 18-year-old students, and it's amazing in terms of the experience. So me going to SMU and the student community to innovate and grow myself as an individual was a very conscious decision to kind of challenge the boundary of the organization and saying, let me step out of that, go into something which is very uncomfortable. But this was something which was done just for the purpose of doing it and opening yourself up to the idea of experiencing something and letting that reflection come back to you. It's not as if the experience, even if there is no agenda, there is some experience that is generated out of this. What did I feel in this entire experience? Right? The sheer beauty of this place. I know it is not, it's not the Alps and it's not the rolling foothills of Himalaya, and it's not like watching whale watching or something like that. But it was something which I felt the sheer physical beauty of that place was intense. You may have some other definition of beauty and you may want to experience that. Isolation. Isolation as a concept is becoming more and more important in today's day and age. Why? Because we are extremely connected. All of you have phones right now. All of you have sent at least 20 messages since morning, told people about your experiences. We are so connected that we probably find it difficult to be with ourselves. So how do you get comfortable with yourself? So isolation is an experience which introduces you for a brief moment. It doesn't have to be permanent. I didn't leave and abandon my family and just park myself in the mountains. But for that brief moment, it gives you that break saying, hey, how does it feel to be completely isolated? The emptiness, the silence, and letting your thoughts talk to you. And you'll be surprised the kind of things that can happen out of that, not just at that moment. The beauty of silence and isolation is you can reflect on that isolation and silence for years to come. I can today put myself in that same experience just by connecting with that. And that's something which is actually becoming critical because there is so much pressure to take action, to perform, to meet some deadline, to achieve some success. The sheer pain is physically extremely tiring. Many of you will go to college and you will face this, where you'll face pain. You'll face a subject which you have not understood, you're struggling with it. You don't have friends, you're all alone. So those are the experiences. This is the riverbed where I actually got lost. And I was really panicking. This was the first day. And I was extremely scared because there's no direction. You have to figure out how you're going to go. Turn left or right. Which way are you going to go? The map says walk 200 meters. 200 meters from what? There is no McDonald's, Starbucks benchmarks over there, right? So how do I figure out which way to go? And you get lost. I must admit this. The first night, I was crying. I wanted to go home. I was in pain. I was like, what have I done? I want to go. But then, okay, you pick up your bag, you put your, start again. And so much so that at the end, on the last day, I don't know if it will play, but yeah, on the last day, I was able to, oh, it's not there. Okay. But on the last day, I was able to do this, and just gives you an idea of how comfortable I had got to that point. But I actually put the phone and recorded myself, then came back to pick up the phone. So, all in all, what I want to say over here is, while you move to your next chapter of going to college, you're making your selections, you're doing whatever experiences you're going to create in life, allow yourself the opportunity to relax, to reflect, and let some of these experiences not be about an agenda or a goal or something that has to be pushed through, but it's just an experience because we are human beings and we are alive. And as part of being alive, these are experiences that we feel. That's the thought that I want to leave you with. Thank you.